Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. The former Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mian Saqib Nisar, retires today. The new Chief Justice, Asif Saeed Khosa, will be sworn in tomorrow. The former Chief Justice will be remembered for some of his major decisions, among which were the decision in the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's case, the case of Asia Bibi. Other work includes his work as far as the dam is concerned. He was also working on the population issue. There's a host of other issues that the former Chief Justice was himself working on. History will be better judge of his work, but he will be remembered for some of the major decisions in his tenure. We'll be talking about that. We'll be also talking about the new Chief Justice and his address when he spoke about building a dam against the delays. He spoke about judicial reform. We'll be talking about all of that, and we'll be talking about the challenges for the new Chief Justice of Pakistan. I have with me Barrister Safiullah Ghori Saab, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Shah Khawar, who's a former Attorney General. Thank you for joining us today. Safiullah Saab, to start off with you, like I said, there are a lot of things that the former Chief Justice will be remembered for. He did major work in a lot of areas. As a lawyer, as a barrister, what will you say about him?
I think that Justice Saqib Nisar will be remembered as one of the most controversial judges throughout history. There have been judgments by him that will obviously be remembered as some of the finest judgments, and yet we have to contrast those with a lot of judgments that many would consider are overstepping of his judicial boundaries. Now, if we were just to go back and look at his history, we'd see that he started off as a very conservative judge. We have, for instance, his earlier judgments in the case of Mustafa Impex, and those were very textual judgments. And back in the day, he used to sort of, stick to the books, stick to whatever statutory limits were put on him. And then from there, we see him turning, as soon as he becomes the Chief Justice, right after that, one of his first cases, I recall, that was the Tayyaba torture case, that little girl. And he took action which led to a lot of media applause, a lot of praise. And from there, we have seen him target almost every aspect of the country. It wasn't just the judicial aspects. It was the bottled water, it was milk, there was the dams, there was the hospitals.
Right. A lot of his suo motos were, of course, related to issues for the common man, for the betterment of national issues, of course.
Right. Well, yes, of course, there were national issues, but then this begs the debate of whether he was using suo moto properly in the first place or not. So the very concept of suo moto is something that many lawyers would believe to be at least somewhat repugnant to law, because it entails a person being a judge in their own case, which is why he's gotten a lot of flack from the legal community as well. And I think a lot of people, Khawar Saab here would testify, that court number 1 was one of those courts where at least the first half of the court was dedicated almost entirely to suo moto cases. And it was only afterwards that he started taking up administrative cases that had to do with actually running the courts and real cases where petitioners had filed cases on issues that affected them. So we've had a whole bunch of interesting things that have gone ahead. He's no doubt surpassed in many ways the previous very active judge, Chaudhry Iftikhar. Right. And his legacy is something that I believe has shaped Pakistan. It is something that history books will remember. It is something that our jurisprudence will sooner or later talk about. Right. I'm absolutely certain that a lot of his decisions are going to go under review, and a lot of cases that I myself am aware of are going to be put forward for judicial review in the coming months. And so now it is upon this Chief Justice to decide whether the legacy of Saqib Nisar will live on as one of a judge who looked out for the country, or one who perhaps was just populist. I think at the end of the day, time will tell better.
Right. Ji Shah Khawar Saab, in your opinion, certainly, Safiullah Saab is...
I'll bit differ with my friend and my younger brother. What I believe is that I have been appearing before Mr. Justice Saqib Nisar for the last 20 years, more than 20 years, in the High Court also, and after he was elevated to the Supreme Court of Pakistan, ever since 2009, I have been appearing before him. And I found him a very outstanding and illustrious judge. Right. He had a full grip on the civil, taxation and corporate law, and the constitutional side also. The difference which is seen in his expertise when he was a simple judge of the Supreme Court and when he took over as the Chief Justice of Pakistan, few of the months when he took over as the Chief Justice of Pakistan, he used to deal with the ordinary cases on the appellate side. But afterwards, after 5-6 months, his lordship started taking the suo motu notices on so many issues. The thing which is to be considered is that why he took so many suo motu actions and why he exercised jurisdiction under Article 184(3) of the Constitution of Pakistan. Because the Constitution of Pakistan has costed responsibility, special responsibility on the Supreme Court of Pakistan to take care of the fundamental rights of the citizens, which has nexus with the public importance. So, why this original jurisdiction was conferred on the Supreme Court of Pakistan? Because when this constitution was being enacted,
Right.
the wisdom of the then constitutional assembly or the parliament was that there must be a check of judiciary on the other parts of the states, two other limbs of the state, which is the executive and the legislature. So whenever the legislature or the executive fail to perform
Right.
and to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens, which has a nexus of the public importance, then the Constitution casts a duty upon the Supreme Court to come forward and protect those rights of the citizens of Pakistan.
But in the history, there's no precedent for as many suo motos as happened.
No,
in
this
the
was,
last time.
I believe this is not worth that how many suo motos have been taken.
Right.
The judicial activism basically started in the era of Mr. Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry,
Right.
and he generously exercised this jurisdiction. And same was the case with the CJP, the former CJP now, Mr. Justice Saqib Nisar. But I believe that he has contributed a lot towards the real problems of the country, of the people. He did a lot for the welfare of the people in the fields of education, in the field of health, clean drinking water, and even the water reservoirs. So I believe that overall, if his overall performance is evaluated,
Right.
I give him a big credit that he has done a lot for this country.
Right. Let me go on to Arif Chaudhry Sahab. We've been joined by Arif Chaudhry Sahab, who's a former president of the Islamabad Bar Association. Thank you for being with us. Ji, Arif Sahab, we have a certain difference of opinion about the tenure of the former Chief Justice now, Mian Saqib Nisar. In your opinion, what do you feel as a lawyer, as a member of the bar, about this his tenure as the Chief Justice of Pakistan?
It was very successful tenure,
Right.
extraordinary tenure. Rather, I quote example of Toynbee, great historian.
Right.
Once he visited Multan. Mukhtar Masood was deputy commissioner, and he wrote this in his book, Awaz-e-Dost.
Right.
He asked a question from Toynbee that all what you have done, we cannot even read. You have done so much in history. Neil and Niger, and there are so many books.
Right.
So the answer was that I have used my time 3 times.
Right.
So that's my compliment for the outgoing Chief Justice, that he used his time many times. You know, whatever he could do, and
Right.
the most important thing is the will. Will and plus, you know, why motives, why somebody is really interested to do all this. Saqib Nisar, as far as I know him, today I can say, and you know, he also said this before the bar, he was my class fellow. I know him. He has no intention to go into politics, and he never intended to do that, you know. All what he has been doing
Right.
was with utmost sincerity of purpose,
Right.
and all those things he was watching. It can, you know, impress anybody who is sensitive. Judicial activism is one thing, but judicial insensitivity is very bad thing. If something is happening, People are facing lot of troubles.
Right.
And there's no one to take care of that, Those who have been destined through their, constitutional mandate,
Right.
though they are not doing it. And then who else should do it? So this was an era when there was total pessimism on the part of the administration, executive. So he had to take, the place, the vacuum. He filled the vacuum. So as my friend Shah Khabar was saying that, all what he was doing, was for the welfare of the people. Although, if I go very critical about him, there is a point, and I would like to add that,
Right.
as far as own house was concerned, it was never put in order. The strongest reservation which
Judicial
I
reform,
have,
which is what you're talking about. Judicial reform is what you're talking
not only judicial reforms,
Right.
but accountability of judiciary.
Right.
And this is a point which I
is
have
also
always been agitating, even as president of the High Court Bar Association.
Right.
And it is not for the first time that I'm saying this. Every time I said, look, you are doing wonderful for the people of Pakistan. They are very happy, but
What
if
about-
you don't deal with the corrupt elements in the judiciary, that's equally bad, because
Right.
people are, pointing fingers when they come to the High Court, and it's particularly the example of Mr. Kasi, who was for Chief Justice, and he remained there for 6 years.
Right.
And the worst period ever, capital High Court bar faced was under his tenure.
Right. Let's
And
come-
the case was against him, and this has been pointed out by our president, Amanullah Karnani today, Supreme Court bar president.
Right.
That, you never did anything, and he got scot-free. What does it mean? That's a failure. So as far as if we, and everybody, I don't know what were his compulsions. He may be knowing that, What he told me, I was not satisfied, but that was too late, because they had already acquitted him of the charges. So what could I compliment on that,
Right.
I comment on that.
Right.
So today, if we count what he did, we have to take everything into account, and we will, and this is all what we are saying is for the future also.
Right. So let's move on
One
and let's
thing I
talk about
didn't
the
like
future.
was that he should not have been speaking so much, particularly in the courtroom. When he used the names of lawyers, prominent lawyers, many a times, I didn't like it, and many people didn't like it.
Right.
So there were very good things, and there were few things which we can differ with. So it is always, in total sum, you go for, when you have to
Yes,
make
yes.
an analysis or make a comment.
Right, Ji, Arif Saab, let's move on. I will come back to you. Ji, Safiullah Saab, moving on, a lot of things that the new Chief Justice said. He talked about wanting to build a dam against delays, which is, again, a lot of things that he said are moving towards judicial reform. What's your take on that? He talks about, quick, speedy disposal of justice, which is also a huge issue as far as, our judicial system is concerned. He picked out the main, issues with the judicial system. He talked about that. He said, there is a host of cases, and there are the judges that we have, the judicial teams, as far as the lawyers, even the whole system itself needs to be revamped.
Right.
What's your view on
And
that?
I'll just start off by a quote from Winston Churchill, who stated something very interesting when Hitler was bombing London. And Winston Churchill at that point of time called in one of his advisors and asked them about what the state of the war was. And they said that, we're probably going to get defeated by the Germans. And Winston Churchill then said, are the courts working? And
Right.
the advisor stated, yes, the courts are working. They're delivering fast, speedy, cheap justice, to which Winston Churchill said, then fear not, we will win this war.
Right.
Because the judicial system is the cornerstone of a society. Now, everything that my seniors have said, I agree with.
Right.
I do believe that Saqib Nisar was somebody who was doing something out of complete
Sincerity,
concern
yes.
for the country. I don't
Right.
believe that there was anything malicious about any of the actions that he has taken.
Right.
But will those actions last is what the question is. So he went
Right.
to the hospitals, he targeted milk and bottled water companies, he tried looking at the schools, and sure, perhaps there was temporary relief that the people of Pakistan did receive. The question really now is, will this relief continue?
As far as the
Will
20% reduction in the school
Yes.
fees, I think
And
that's
so
it.
there's been of course a lot of actions, and so we need to come back to what my senior just stated a while ago, that what really the job of a Chief Justice is to do first is put
Right.
their own house in order, ensure that the courts are working, and the courts are an absolute mess right now. The fact is that we have 1.9 million cases in pendency, as was stated by
Right.
the CGP, the new CGP. There
Right.
are only 3,000 judges. That makes 633 cases per judge.
Right.
That is simply impossible for any judge, even the most skilled judge, to deal with. And we have the most skilled CJP right now. He's a man who has written 5,500 judgments. He's a man whose judgments are some of the best judgments any Pakistani mind has ever come up with.
Right.
And he himself is stating that it is not the capacity of the judges to deal with these things. So until and unless you have far-reaching reforms. Now, the reason why we have some countries as perhaps legally more developed is because their judicial systems work in different ways. Now, Justice Khosa
What
is
kind
widely
of
being
change can we expect from
right.
the
So,
new
so
Chief
in the
Justice?
UK, for instance, there was one man. His name was Lord Wolfe, and he brought the Wolfe reforms. The Wolfe reforms entirely changed the legal system, which resulted in the United Kingdom becoming a center for legal dispute resolution.
Right.
And so we could expect many changes. We could expect he's already stated that there's going to be increased use of technology. There's going to be people could perhaps, lawyers could appear in different benches via television or internet links. But
Right.
more than that, the real issue here is dividing up the cases into different forms,
Right.
making administrative judges and then making normal judges. Administrative judges would decide how long a case would go on for, where any particular case would be fixed.
Right.
And of course, then there are different types of cases. And it's not just that. It's not just the issue of different cases being sped up.
Right.
It's also the fact that there's a whole host of different courts which are constantly fighting for jurisdiction. So the Chief Justice in his inaugural address mentioned that there are a lot of special courts. There are anti-narcotics court, corruption courts, NAP courts,
Yes.
anti-terrorism courts. There's a whole host of them, and all of them need to be brought into one regular court system. I think I discussed this on the last show with you, that what we have is a general law and what we have is special law.
Right.
And special law is something that is to be taken as an exception. It should not become general law. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, special law is where people now go for most of their dispute resolutions, whereas general law remains controversial.
Right, let me
So-
go on to Khabar Saab.
Absolutely.
Khabar Saab, in your opinion, you think that these kind of reforms, of course, the incumbent Chief Justice, he talked about all of this. You think that these kind of reforms, like, even Barrister Safiullah is saying, we are going to be moving towards them?
Yes, there is more to be done in the reforms in the judiciary, and especially the district judiciary and even the high courts and the Supreme Court. What
It's
I believe
certainly
is
a huge monumental task.
what I believe is that the Chief Justice elect, who is going to
Right.
sworn in tomorrow,
Right.
he will take over as the Chief Justice of Pakistan. I believe he has set his priorities. Although he has a very short tenure, he will be retiring in the, I believe, 19th or 20th of December this year.
Right.
But he has set his priorities, and those are very encouraging. As my friend was referring to the abolishing of the special courts, and he suggested that all the courts should be brought under the one umbrella of the district judge.
Right.
I believe this is a very good concept. And apart from that, in the start of his speech made before the reference, in the
Right.
full court reference,
Right.
he loudly praised Mr. Justice Saqib Nisar of his
Right.
achievements and his endeavors and whatever he did in respect of the protection of fundamental rights of the people.
Right.
But apart from that, a few things which he pointed out, I believe that those are of very vital importance. Like he talked about the video link system, which is very good, because the lawyers who have to come from all over the country,
Right.
and they come here, and sometimes there are adjournments, and there's so many other inconveniences. I believe this is a very good concept, that a lawyer sitting in Karachi, Quetta, Lahore, Peshawar, if he is provided with the facility of the video link,
Right.
and he can directly argue the case and address the court through this modern device. And another things, I believe, which he has made emphasis,
Right.
that the jurisdiction of under Article 184(3) must be exercised in a very, very extraordinary circumstances. And for that matter, he also suggested that a mechanism will be devised
Right.
with the consultation of his other brother judges, that some parameters may be set for the exercise of this extraordinary jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And especially he pointed out to words
Right.
the provision of a right of appeal against any judgment passed under the dispensation of Article 184(3). I believe this is highly needed. And he suggested some amendments in the Supreme Court rules and also emphasized that the Article 188, which is the review jurisdiction of the Supreme Court,
Right.
the scope of which is always very limited. He suggested that that should also be widened. These are the things which could be done by amending the Supreme Court rules.
Right.
But there are some amendments which are to be carried out by the legislatures. He also pointed out to them. And especially talking about
He talked about inter-institutional dialogue.
Of course,
Particularly.
that is of very importance.
Right.
Because there is no mechanism in our constitutional dispensation that there are inconsistency and lack of communication and
Right.
lack of working relationship between the three limbs of the state, which is the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. He suggested a very fine thing, I believe,
Right.
that the office of the President of Pakistan is an office which is, he is constitutional head of the state,
Right.
and he's supposed to be impartial. He does not have any political affiliation. And he suggested that under his auspices, these three limbs of the states must be brought on one table, and
Right.
they should have a dialogue, and any inconsistency and any deficiency in their working relationship could be taken care
This
of.
is rather extraordinary.
I believe,
no,
I
Arif
believe
Chaudhry sahab-
this is a very, very rational approach.
Yeah,
Right.
it is too ambitious, all what he has pointed out, and an agenda. It's for the first time that
Right.
a Chief Justice who has to take oath the next day, he has come up with an agenda, written
Right.
agenda. At least if we live till the time he retires, and you are there to invite us, we will be very comfortable to dilate upon his achievements and failures in terms of his performance,
Right.
while just having a look on the agenda he had set. And that's very important. But
Right.
one thing he also suggested,
Right.
that is the setting up of an other bench within Supreme Court, which would deal with constitutional matters. But more important is unquote, is that it's not the Chief Justice prerogative to deal with Article 184(3). It is the prerogative of the Supreme Court itself.
Each and every judge.
Every judge. I mean, so
Because
our-
every judge is a Supreme Court in itself.
Yeah, what we have been watching and experiencing for last many years, although it started, let me correct it,
Right.
with Afzal Zullah. And
Yes.
Afzal Zullah was the first to take the
Chief Justice of Pakistan.
Yeah, Chief Justice of Pakistan to take suo motu notice as Article 184(3), and it started basically from India.
Right.
So he followed the suit. So it's not a bad thing to take care of those things. And even the courts in other countries, they are not insensitive towards all these issues. Article 32 in the Constitution of India enshrines all those things which are here in Article 184(3). And the more important thing is, although whatever we are talking will not be possible within this short span of time, we are very, today
Right.
overzealous of after the speech, as it has come up a revolution in the judiciary. I wish it could happen like that, but things sometimes don't happen the same way we think. The important thing is that the courts, all the courts, even the High Court, which is already vested with the same power
Right.
under Article 199. So why shouldn't High Court exercise this power in the first instance? So even the concept of this appeal, you may not have to legislate because that is already there. If a decision is taken by High Court, that is automatically open to an appeal by the, because this right, if you have to create, for that you have to have a document, instrument, legislative instrument. Without that, you cannot do it. So I think all these things, instead of one Chief Justice coming up like a champion or captain, because there is no concept of a captain
As
in
far as the
judiciary.
judiciary is concerned.
Although it is known with the era, always known with the Chief Justice, Rehnquist era, Marshall's era,
Right.
so Marshall's Supreme Court,
Right.
this Supreme Court and that Supreme Court, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the Chief Justice whose will prevails. Even all other judges, they equally contribute.
But
And
practically speaking,
practically another thing,
Right.
because the concept of this appeal, here everything comes up to Supreme Court. Why? In the other developed world, even in India, all these courts at provincial level,
right,
they make a decision, and if there is an inconsistency and there in those judgments, then that goes to the Supreme Court, because Supreme Court has very few judges. Even in America, it also happens. United States Supreme Court means the court which has to resolve those issues, such as, if you remember,
But I think that is-
burning of flag issue.
yes.
That was, decided by one court, and they awarded the death penalty, and the court found inconsistency, so it was decided. So here also we need to change the module, that everything should not go directly, even maintenance suit.
But isn't
it
that what he's
starts and
saying?
It has to go.
Yes.
Isn't that what he's saying, Safiullah Sahab? Isn't that what he's essentially saying when he talks
yes,
about?
we need to admit the fact that
When he
and
talks
you've
about
just stated
reform-
that, yes, that's part of the reform, because for instance in the United States you've got a country much bigger than Pakistan, and the United States Supreme Court per year takes not more than 17 cases.
Right.
So on the one hand you have the biggest court in the world dealing with such few cases, and then we have the Pakistani Supreme Court, which is dealing with just about every case that comes its way. And so for that, the Chief Justice has already stated that the Supreme Court is not going to look at matters of fact, it is only going to look at matters of law. In fact, it will not look at matters of fact, only matters of law. And the final forum for decision of matters of fact will be the High Court, as it should be,
One
according to the
sentence,
Constitution.
I'm sorry
Ji,
for
ji,
that.
ji.
If you bring uniformity in decisions, so then this issue will also settle.
Get
Vanish
resolved.
away.
Because
Absolutely.
divergence of opinion, divergence of judgments, and that also depending upon the judge, not upon the one bench or the other bench, means provincial benches of high courts.
Right.
Here the difference is that of every bench is different from others, and so you have to bring uniformity, because this is also a settled law. By as you legislate, and this is judge-made law which we are talking about. So judge-made law should have also uniformity, so things can easily be resolved.
And you're right. And
yeah, so
he's right.
that's what one of the features of law is. That law by its very nature needs to be certain. You cannot obviously call something law which is uncertain. If you cannot predict with at least a fair accuracy as
But
to
if
what is
you
going to
have
happen.
a jurisprudence like Arif Saab is saying, based on a case-to-case basis, then this is what you end up with.
The common law system has its beauty, and one of the beauty is the fact that you do have a difference of opinion as opposed
Right.
to standard civil law or canon law systems and the rest of the world. But the fact remains that even common law has at least one source of law, one source of legislation, which is usually the Supreme Court, and the judgments usually flow down. Now, what has been happening here is, and we have just heard for a little while here, that the high courts have been, and at some points of time, exercising their powers way beyond what they should be. Article 199 is something that the CGP has mentioned needs to be clipped, because obviously
Ji, this is
they're
what
far
I was
exceeding
saying.
their jurisdiction when under Article 199.
Right.
And yet, at the other hand, we also need for them to conform to whatever the rest of the laws are, conform to what the rest of the high courts are saying. They need to have mutual respect for each other's decisions. And as a lawyer, I have personally witnessed judges from certain high courts feeling that other high courts of the countries are not good enough. For instance, thinking that these high courts are not big enough, and as a result stating that they would want better precedents.
Right.
And that has to do with perhaps mental servitude of our general system rather than actual following of the law. Now, one of the things that were mentioned here, and I feel that's something that really needs a lot more dilation, is the dialogue that you've mentioned. And the new Chief Justice has mentioned that there needs to be a dialogue, but he's also sparked a considerable debate by stating that the dialogue is not to be meant only for the three limbs of the state, but also for the military and the intelligence agencies.
Right.
He has mentioned in his address that we cannot deny that they exercise a role. And so when we sit down to decide what the powers of the state should be, where the limitations of the state should be, and what everybody is to be doing, we are to include the military and the intelligence services of Pakistan in that debate, so that we can once and for all also see
Which is extraordinary.
how far they should reach.
Right.
Now, this is something that goes way beyond what the Constitution states.
Right.
But I would laud the Chief Justice here for stating something that we have all known for a very long time. This is, as he mentioned in his...
I'm sorry, it's not a deviation from the Constitution, but basically, practical problem we are facing these days of missing person, which has been mentioned by the Chief Justice. There are...
Arif Sahab, I have to,
Yeah.
I have to go to Shah Khawar Sahab also,
Yeah,
then I'll
please.
come back to you. Ji, Shah Khawar Sahab, how do you see this development?
I think the development is good, and about the problems which have been highlighted
Like Arif Sahab is saying,
by
you know,
the Chief Justice designate, I think this sounds very good. But
bringing
most
it-
of the things
right.
which he discussed, it relates to the business of the Parliament, because this is the Parliament which, in its own wisdom, have to legislate and to make amendments in the laws and the Constitution. The judiciary can just suggest them with their pronouncements in their judgments that they should reform laws and should bring amendments in the laws as well as the Constitution. But these are not binding upon them. Again, this is the Parliament which has to legislate the law and has to amend the Constitution and other laws. So far as the discussion which was going on, that there was a comparison of the US Supreme Court and Pakistani Supreme Court, I believe there is a difference. The US Supreme Court is comprising of, if I'm not wrong, of 9 judges who don't have the age limit even.
Right.
And they only deal with the cases, high constitutional matters, not disputes or not controversies which have been decided by the high courts of the states. They have a altogether different judicial system. Every case does not come to the Supreme Court. There are appellate courts within the states which take care of the cases.
Right.
Only selected cases come to the US Supreme Court. But as far as our Supreme Court is concerned, the Constitution of Pakistan has vested it with 3-4 jurisdictions. One is the appellate jurisdiction, other is the advisory jurisdiction,
Right.
and third is the original jurisdiction. So these jurisdictions have been conferred upon the Supreme Court by the Constitution of Pakistan, and they are to discharge all these responsibilities towards the state as well as the citizens of Pakistan.
But
So-
when we talk about this, considering the separation of powers, and when we talk about this inter-institutional dialogue, isn't it rather extraordinary?
That is extraordinary. Although, because the judiciary, the composition of judiciary is that they cannot make direct contact with the executive or with the legislature.
Right.
There is only one bridge, I believe, which is available. That is the office of the Attorney General for Pakistan. Because he is the senior law
Right.
officer of the Supreme Court of the country. And at the same time, he is the principal legal advisor of the government also. So he could be a bridge between the judiciary and the executive and the
Right.
parliament.
Right. Let
But
me-
I believe this idea is not bad.
Right.
There are so many things which are to be discussed and decided with a collective wisdom.
But practically speaking, how? Let
Let-
me go on to
let me-
Arif Sahab.
yeah.
I'll just come back. Ji, Arif Sahab.
Let me explain to you one aspect which is very important, paramount consideration of
Right.
all who are concerned about it. Justice Khosa, why I say he will not be very proactive, and he will not, take these matters,
On the original side.
original side. The reason is the judgment in Khizr Ayad case. For the first time,
Right.
what happened, in Lahore, they all sat together under Justice Chaudhry Iftikhar, and they sorted out a problem, and that by sorting out problem, they created a bigger problem. And that is a judgment where openly I'm telling my Chief Justice knew tomorrow who is going to take oath. That has taken away the right of liberty of a citizen. Because prior to that, it used to be writ of habeas corpus, and there would have been no work in the High Court until and unless the order would have been passed in that writ, and bailiff would have been deputed to recover the person wherever he might be. And they sat in their own wisdom, because those days, I was a member of the Bar Council and vice chairman, and we were having a dialogue with the judiciary that no orders were being, all the orders were being flouted by the police. So they devised a way, after consultation with the judiciary, what he is recommending here.
Right.
So I'm really afraid of that, because
You
they
think that it can have, adverse
no,
effects?
dialogue is okay, but with that dialogue, what happened today, that's what I want to discuss with you.
Right.
That dialogue took away the right of habeas corpus petition from the people. And then the concept of justice of peace. There is no justice of peace.
Right.
And the powers ex officio were given to the district
The
judge,
district,
the district and
or
session judge.
additional district judges.
Additional district judge. So what is happening? This right, which was used, and the police was really scared of taking away the liberty of a person, because they knew that the High Court will just come into it, and we will have to pay for it. But after that, they don't care, and they take away the liberty of a person, and then anything, any police aggression, you only go to the additional session judge. And what's happening with 22A CRPC, every lawyer knows that, So that's where I would be very honestly requesting my Chief Justice. It is fair enough that there should be a dialogue, because they are facing problem of missing person. But missing persons problem should not be sorted out like 22A CRPC.
Right, let me go
It should be, it should be sorted out by telling them that, look, enough is enough. Now, if you want to run this state, you cannot take away the liberties of people. You have to carve out laws, special laws. They, even in America, they have special laws for insurgency to deal with. You can have that,
What about special courts? I mean, let me go on to Shah Khawar
Special
Sahab.
court,
Shah
if
Khawar
you're
Sahab,
talking about
right, do we
military
need,
courts.
Right, do you think that they will get the extension? Do you think that we need military courts now?
Now, why can't you increase the, at one point here, which I was missing here, before I go to the court,
Ji.
special court. First of all these judges, including the Chief Justice, must think that, if you are going to have judges from the judiciary, those are the persons, the diamonds who have to deliver justice.
Right.
So how are you going to do that? If what has so far been in our eyes, what happening, what we have been watching, the judges who were dear and near to the judges, those persons, they were elevated irrespective of their educational or any qualification, whatever. So the judiciary,
Which goes back to the fact that there should be, as you like
so
you mentioned, that there
now
should
if
be
they really want to have a
judicial
change,
accountability also.
first of all, they should start from picking up those judges with the recommendation of the bars, and taking the input of the bar council is a must. They should not be silent spectator, and the 18th Amendment should not be used in such a way that they are just simply sitting. And those guys, against whom there were reports that they should not be confirmed, and recommendation by the Chief Justice, they were confirmed, So this should not happen.
Right,
So
the
as far as the special courts are concerned, if you have good judges, and if you enhance the capacity
Right.
of your existing judicial system, believe me, you don't need even these courts.
Right. Let me go on to Shah Khawar Sahab. Do you think that the military courts, do we need them? Do you think that they will get the extension?
What I believe is that I believe in the civilian dispensation, and especially in the parliamentary democracy, the concept of military courts trying civilian matters is alien to the law. But we have seen in the past that there was a ray of terrorism, and there were
Special circumstances.
special and extraordinary circumstances where this amendment in the Constitution was made. and that was even challenged before the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan, and Supreme Court of Pakistan with majority, they recommended them and just considered it as a sore pill for the cure of the disease.
Right.
But that was a limited time period, 2 years. What I believe is that if,
But the reason why the reason why they were created, we haven't really resolved
no,
those.
yes, we have not resolved them, because the reasons of creating these, of enhancing of the Pakistan Army Act courts on the civilian side was in a very extraordinary circumstance, as you pointed out, because the anti-terrorism courts which we have, they lack those logistics or other important ingredients, like the judges who are known to everyone, they sit in the court, they are exposed to the people, and they are very easily could be targeted, and we have seen some instances where the judges were ambushed, the prosecutors, the witnesses. So that was in an extraordinary dispensation. What I believe is that if it is needed,
Right.
if the security forces and if this is the collective wisdom of the parliament, that the military courts may again be established, I think there should not be any hindrance from the even judiciary. But one thing which has been pointed out by the Honorable CJP designate, that
Right.
if the parliament again brings some constitutional amendments of establishment of the military courts, the right of appeal must vest with the high courts. This is a
Right.
new concept.
Right. Unfortunately,
but
that's
again,
all the
but
time
again,
that
I
we
would
have.
say
Gee, we-
that this could be his desire.
Right.
There could be some wisdom in it.
Right.
But after all, this is the domain of the parliament which has to decide
Right,
that
right.
what amendment is to be.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. Barrister Safiullah Saab, thank you for being with us. Shah Khawar Saab, thank you for joining us today. Arif Chaudhry Saab, thank you for being with us today. As far as the tenure of the incumbent Chief Justice is concerned, let's hope that he has said a lot of things that he intends to do. He's talked about a lot of reforms. He's talked about quick, speedy disposal of justice. Let's hope that we can move towards the kind of justice system that he envisages. Let's hope for the best. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.